Throw up your Game Grumps footage and staple on some credits, cause we're dissecting Sonic. Now, Sonic 06. When most people talk about it, they cite the appalling look, inconsistent game themes, weird love subplot, mounds of glitches, in general bad game design practices, and loading times. Which is quite the long, justifiable list of criticisms, and explaining them can literally be boiled down to not enough time on the developer side. But that doesn't make for an interesting episode. Everyone already knows that Sega went for a Christmas release and the game wasn't finished. Everyone already knows Sonic Team had a bad record for 3D Sonic game. Everyone already knows they went big and paid the price. So what am I going to talk about? This game has been discussed to death. You could probably find a criticism for nearly every animation in this game. It seems that every frame has been torn apart and put back together again to paint out why this game was so bad. So finding the underlying reasons for why different elements of the game were terrible seems to already be done. Except for one thing. As far as I know. And that would be loading times. Not just complaining about them, but explaining why they ended up like that. So, based on my research, loading times come from not being optimal with disk data. You can install stuff onto the hard drive, which generally allows for faster load times than quieter consoles, but in essence both act the same way on a computer. For all of you more traditional gamers like moi, have you ever noticed when you put a game disc into a computer that it acts like a drive and file explorer? That is no accident. When the computer has the game put into it and you activate the game, it works like any other program. Data is taken from the game through use of little bumps made by lasers which represent binary, and put onto the RAM where it is then used by the CPU to make the game work. I can already feel the collective what of anyone who hasn't researched this before. I'm not really explaining myself, am I? So let's start off with the CD. A CD is created by putting miniature bumps into the bottom of it. Really, really tiny bumps. When you have a bump called a pit, that represents a 0. When you don't have one, otherwise called land, that represents the number 1. When a computer starts to read a disk, it shoots a little red laser light up onto it. Land will reflect it straight back, whereas pits will scatter the light. A photocell detects this and puts down this corresponding binary, which then can be converted by the computer into data and into the game. Which is a terrible oversimplification. Just the last sentence alone of changing binary into data could take up an entire textbook to explain. This is not saying I know it, in fact, I don't, but experts on this kind of stuff consistently say that. So sorry to you computer science people, this really doesn't serve the advanced topic any justice whatsoever. It's amazing computers can even run. But moving on, another thing I talked about was RAM. What is that? It stands for Random Access Memory. Pretty much this is where all the data for programs you are currently using is thrown to be quickly accessed. It acts like your short-term memory. RAM is really quick, but all the data is deleted as soon as you turn the computer off. So if you're playing Battlefront 2, of course, amazing game, then files for Battlefront 2 will be stored in the RAM to allow your game to run quicker than actually pulling them from the hard drive. Having a larger RAM doesn't necessarily mean running a game quicker. It means being able to run more programs at the same time. Finally, I talked about the CPU, otherwise known as a central processing unit. What a CPU does is pretty much process things, as the name suggests. It does calculations and directs other parts of the system to allow for the program to run. The CPU does this by taking the data from the RAM. But a CPU can act in two different ways: programmed or processor I/O, and direct memory access or bus mastering. Processor I/O, abbreviated as PIO, is another way of working with the system where the CPU controls the data flow between the hard drive and the RAM, because, as mentioned before, the RAM is much faster than the hard drive. This slowed down things though because the CPU was occupied until all the data was transferred to the RAM. However, we now use direct memory access, abbreviated as DMA, where the data transfer between the hard drive and RAM is made without the CPU allowing for the system to work faster. A lot to one just sentence, right? But how in the world does all this advanced computer talk connect anywhere to Sonic the Hedgehog 2006? I don't remember the cutscene where Tails started teaching Sonic how to build a computer out of paperclips. Well, this goes back to the loading times. The final reason why the loading times are so long based on all of that is due to not enough optimization on disk. Yeah, we went through all of that just to say that simple sentence. Aren't computers fun? Pretty much the idea that seems to be scattered about is that data isn't clumped together on the disk, so it takes longer for the laser to find it. Because remember, we're not taking and throwing the entire game into the RAM. If that were the case, you should be able to take out the disk amidst the playing session and still have the entire game work fine. No, each time a new area is loaded, the disk most likely has to be spun around a lot to find different assets, which takes time. And it is also very probable that the game is loading entire areas, breaking them down, and then loading an entirely new area. From what people can tell, it doesn't use many optimization techniques to allow for it to work quicker. My own theory being that they wanted to build a giant game, and we're starting to clump in areas that would make sense for that, but they didn't have enough time. So yes, we went from Sonic to CPUs. I can't wait for Tails to be explaining this in the next game.